Hello. Today, the proposed title for this video today is where I think the narcissist abuser and the victim have things in common. As you can tell, it's a snappy little title. I'm going to have to work on it. I've also thought of calling it Rageaholics, because that's a kind of a, maybe it should be a subtitle. Making a cup of tea. What's been going through my mind recently? I'm going to put a disclaimer up first. One thing I've started to realise is that not all the stories of narcissistic abuse I'm hearing are the same as mine. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing, because so many of the community are from America, but so many of the abusers that are being described by the victims, the behaviour of the abusers in America, and this is a wide generalisation and I apologise up front for that, the abuse is so base, it's so crude. I mean, if you compare, obviously most of us have heard Ollie Matthews, one of my favourite community leaders, for want of a better expression, sorry Ollie, community personalities and testifiers. If you've heard his phone call with a narcissistic mother, her behaviour is so utterly crude and base, and I realise a lot of the victims that are telling their stories in America, the behaviour of their abusers is so transparently and unapologetically crude and bullying and vile, vile. I mean, that woman, Ollie's mother in that video, and I'm sure he will have no objection to me saying this, talking about his lovely wife, absolutely fantastic person, she calls her a whore and over, and it is utterly dreadful, and so unconscionably, rude. I mean, it's a barrage. It's basically just, I can't remember if he stopped short of swearing or not, but it makes no difference, because, for considering that narcissists are so obsessed with propriety, and I think that is a consistent characteristic. They're so obsessed with propriety. They're so obsessed with, well, you started it, or they're so obsessed with, you broke the law, or you committed fraud over things that are, which are usually like, they'll reach for any kind of legality or any kind of propriety to justify their argument, the thing they're saying. You're mad. They'll reach for any kind of psychiatric sort of standard, if you like. Sorry, my word finding isn't what it was. I don't know if it's the illness. They're always reaching. They're always reaching for propriety. Always. As if they're being backed up by society all the time. And this is one of those funny things. This is one of those funny things where that's obvious, isn't it? Like, we all know that. We all know that, Mr. WTF, But you know what, that's the first time I think I've said that. I might have inferred it, or I might have touched on it before. That's the first time I've said it in so many words. They're always talking as if society's going to back them up. Society's going to back me up. This kind of, there's some kind of gang. There's always a gang, there's always a community backing up a narcissist in their argument. The group feel. That's something I heard a lot in the 90s when I was at university. When political correctness was in not just in the ascendant, but had almost completely taken over everything. You know, I was studying theatre, and there was just the guys in that group were the nicest, with only one or two exceptions, and even those exceptions were really not. You couldn't describe them really. I wouldn't say they were misogynists or anything like that. They were just mainly we were a bunch of very gentle boys in that group, and one or two of the guys were just like a little bit more sort of blokey, but barely. And the women in that group, they were just harridans. They were just, not all of them, there were one or two exceptions, but they'd got the political correctness that was absolutely, it was like David Mamet makes a whole play about this. I can't remember what it's called now. I'm always doing this. I never do any research. I never prepare these things. David Mamet wrote a fantastic play set in a university around this time, in which he kind of showed both sides of the argument. I was stunned when I saw it because I was living it, and when these women would go off and they'd huddle together and have a little chat about things, and then somebody would be sent to you, and you'd get this conversation where they'd say, "Well, the group feel," and you'd be sort of basically criticised by proxy, sort of kind of court that you weren't invited to. It's this kind of Kafkaesque sort of. Come traipsing up to you like some solicitor from a meeting with that you weren't. It wasn't appropriate for you to be at, and they would say the group feel anything like that is always. I mean, it always smacks of narcissism. Any kind of whitewashing of personal responsibility replaced with a kind of, well, the force of public opinion dictates that you back down about this, change your mind about this, that your behaviour was inappropriate, and it's not. And you see, in my philosophy, everybody's behaviour should be questioned, or it should be up for questioning. Nobody's behaviour is beyond investigation, including mine, especially mine. This reliance on I'm going to have to say, almost like phantom, congregationary sort of societal thumbs up or thumbs down. Don't you think it's highly suspect? I have a terrible fear that in society, every time we're given the opportunity to be individuals, we run back into being pack creatures, pack animals. That for all of our... I mean, if you look at what happened in Russia, like, I'm no historian, but I've read George Orwell, and that's going to have to do. Please feel free to write in and inform me. But in Animal Farm, which is about the Russian Revolution, and in the Russian Revolution, the people rise up demanding that they have a socialist society, and it's not necessarily their fault, but they end up with an even worse situation. They fight. There's an explosion of fighting for individuality, for a socialist society, for raising the dictatorship or whatever it was before. Sorry, that's not the right phrase, but it was, they were unhappy with the government that precipitated the revolution. But they ended up with an even worse, and then they settled for it. Now, maybe that's because of the military might of the new regime. But what's interesting is that's what seems to happen, is every time people get the chance to think for themselves or be themselves or do for themselves, we blow it. We blow it. And what's fascinating about narcissism, and by narcissism I don't mean the syndrome or the condition or the abuse, I mean the conversation. I mean what they call in a film, I can't pronounce this correctly, mise en scène. The scene of it, the moment of it, the setting of it, the theatre of war of it, the entire thing is what we've got a lot of people breaking free of what's kind of brainwashing, isn't it? Don't you think? And being extremely intent on establishing their personal sovereignty. I love that word. I've heard that in somebody else's video, and I was aware of the word before, but that's a very interesting word for describing what narcissistic abuse victims are trying to secure, their autonomy and their personal sovereignty. Something they've kind of given away or they've been persuaded to give away, or they've been orientated into not nurturing. And so it takes all kinds of people to make up a world. All kinds of people to make up a world. Some of us that are prone to being sympathetic to conspiracy theories are very, very worried about the idea that narcissism is a trend, and it's been a trend throughout society, and that there are people in positions of great power who understand that narcissism is the natural order of things when it comes to human beings. And we have a society that is based on narcissistic overlords, a golden child class, and then a kind of ambiguous group that are the sort of, if you like, the sort of the unwashed class, not literally unwashed, but the grey, ambiguous, the amorphous voting public. This is probably interestingly relevant with the Trump thing going on in America at the moment. I'm not a Trump supporter. I think the man's extremely dangerous. You can't put a man like that in charge of the Western world. This kind of sort of spongy sort of the vote can swing group, who make up most people. Those people are kept as dumb as possible, and they are they're either so busy working their arses off trying to have enough to eat that they don't get out of their box, or they're so comfortable and so distracted by Facebook and television and popular culture that they don't get out of their box for that. And then you've got a scapegoat class. And that scapegoat class can take in a whole lot. Whatever's going wrong in your society, that scapegoat class are going to get the blame. I am getting way out of my depth. But obviously in America, in my lifetime, what an extraordinary scapegoating of African Americans in the 20th century we saw. So frightening. So frightening. A ethnic group of people who white people have who turned into slaves, right? I mean, what more do I need to even finish this thought? And now, you know, let's face it, only a few generations later, you know, still being culturally disenfranchised. I don't even want to get into it because I do not, you know, I'm not as ignorant as some people, but I know when to say I don't know enough, and I to my shame, I apologise for that. My own personal issues have completely obscured a lot of things in my life I wish I knew more about. I'm also quite dyslexic, which makes it very hard for me to research. So yeah, I mean, so. And that's just one of them. I mean, in all societies all over the world, I put it to you, and these are sometimes usually democratic societies, democratic but capitalist societies. And if they're not democratic and capitalist, look at, you got like what Russia tried to do, which obviously is so I think it was Churchill who said. I might again, probably wrong. I think it was Churchill who said democracy is the worst system we've got, but it's better than all the alternatives. Something like that. Somebody tell me what he really said. I am really. Do you know what I think? I think I'm getting worse. Maybe it's. Oh God! I think I'm getting worse at this. So society keeps reasserting itself, and people keep falling back into this pack animal mentality of saying the group feel. I've spoken to everybody in the group, and what we think is this. You know, all of these things. There's an element of kind of character assassination always in this sort of talk. You know, so that's a kind of a preface to where I'm going next. These are kind of trends with people. This is how people skew. You know, this is how people skew. They like. Now, I think the narcissist community is predominantly about people breaking free of that kind of thing, and that's why I'm here, among other things. I think every single person here needs to be, as Finally Free from Narcissism said, thinking for themselves. And I think generally people do. And we have this whole sticky issue that we've been fighting with. Well, I've been struggling with it. I keep going there in my videos, and it's like, are narcissistic victims like narcissists? You know, are they like their abusers? What? And I've gone there a few times, and I know why I've gone there. I've not really explained it very well though. What it is what I see in myself that troubles me is rage, self-righteousness, self-justification, and an entitlement, a feeling of entitlement of position. So when people have slighted me, my reaction has been, how dare they say that to me? And I think that's narcissistic, and it probably is. It doesn't make me a pathological narcissist, and people have explained that to me. And I've been very lazy and sloppy in the way that I've presented it, but that's fine, because I think that's good in a way, because it's enabled us to have the conversation, and people have come back to me and said, brother, you talk a lot of sense, but you're not a narcissist. and I'm very grateful, and you know, maybe I needed to push that. I don't know what my motives were, but I pushed that, and people came back, and it was almost like people are saying to me, look, clean up your terms, because you're misleading people. You know, that, how can that be? You looked after your mother, you're evidently empathic, you evidently care about people, the way you talk and the way you write in your comments pages. What are you doing saying you're a narcissist? I mean, what is that? Well, yeah, good. I'm glad. Let's nail this ghost to the coffin. Good. The thing, and I also think of Escape from Narcissism's video, and who can live without Escape from Narcissism's videos? It's not for nothing that she's in my top 3. Basically, she said that she talked about when she was at a gig, years ago, before she knew any of this, and she was furious when somebody criticised her for putting out flyers at their gig, and they weren't being horrible, they weren't being in any way narcissistic, but they had the temerity, if I may reframe slightly, or if I may reiterate through my own prism, Escape from Narcissism story, they had, for her, in her experience of the situation, they had the temerity to, at the time, they had the temerity to ask her to not do that for some reason. I don't know if it was that it was probably it might have been against the venue's policy to advertise, but whatever the reason, and she flew at him, and she gave him. She ripped a strip off him, and she's looking back. She's terribly embarrassed that she did that. And what courage from Escape from Narcissism to tell that story. And out of all the stories I've heard, that is one of the most powerful experiences I've had as part of the community, because it made me it made it fair, it made it possible for me to unearth my most shameful episodes. Some of them I haven't had the courage to talk about yet, but I have. It has. If she can do it, we can all do it. I mean, what courage! I take my hat off to her, and it's things like that make, and I think that actually video is called "I Was on My Way to Becoming a Narcissist," which of course that's very much a matter for Escape from Narcissism to determine and comment on. But this is the area where I'm interested. I've just realised I'm going all the way through all this, and all I'm doing is making a very poor version of something Escape from Narcissism's already done. How embarrassing. I am going to make it mine. So, I've been thinking a lot about my father and my immediate family, because I've had some correspondence with my dad that I can't avoid for legal reasons to do with this house. But I am following very strict guidelines about how to communicate with him that I've been given by a friend of mine who knows what they're talking about. And the short version of that advice is avoid anything you don't have to put in the letter. Do not editorialise. Do not get into conversation. Do not respond to solicitations to get into conversation. Answer each point, if the point needs answering, with one sentence. By the time you've finished, if possible, your response should only be 3 or 4 lines long. If that's impossible, then refer to the previous rules. Do not become emotional. Do not give away any extraneous information. Do not respond to any baiting. Keep it tight. Think of the letter as if it was going to be read out in court. Okay? So I've been thinking about my father and my childhood. And do you know what I remember more than anything else? I remember that underneath everything was this seething rage. Not the kind of rage I heard in Phone Call with a Narcissist Mother on Ollie Matthews, quite rightly now, legendary video, when she kept calling Ollie's beautiful and wonderful wife a whore, utterly disgraceful. Not that kind of rage. An insidious, nasty, greedy, jealous, seething, have I said that already? Just pit of, what's the word? Just prejudicial, vile, animosity that's just there, just boiling, like the heart of a volcano, you know? And it expressed itself in so many kind of quiet ways. It didn't erupt at the volcano. It was always seeping out. And I remember, if I was talking to my father, he would respond, and I want to use the sentence with great delight, but it wasn't delight at all. It was this envious, rageful, wrathful sort of nasty criticism. If I made any kind of syntax error or grammatical error in what I was saying, and he'd repeat it back to me. He kind of, so if I said, I mean, I'm always making grammatical errors, I don't know if you've noticed, but if I said something like, I can't think of an example now. I remember reading in a review of a record that was in the charts, and I knew both me and my father seemed to think it was a really good tune, and he was saying, and it was on the radio or something, and so in a moment of like light, and this singer's voice was described as having kind of a muscular voice, which I thought was a fantastic sort of bit of lyrical sort of creative journalism to describe this guy's great voice. I think the song was You're the Voice, I remember it, and for some reason, I must have been a teenager by then, or getting on that way, and he said, oh, that's a good song, isn't it? Or I said it's a good song or something. We were agreeing about something for once, you know. And I said, yeah, he's got this really muscular voice, hasn't he? And this isn't the best example of what I'm trying to describe. And he kind of went like, muscular voice. Like, completely putting me on the spot, completely stripping me of any kind of contribution to the conversation as being legitimate, right? And I immediately had to justify it and said, yeah, I was reading a review and they described it like that, which then took all the wind out of his sails, because it's not me making it up. I'm relaying something I've read by somebody in the national press, and then you've got the silence. You've got the right. He's now lost his position because he's not really having a disagreement with me. He's having a disagreement with somebody who's earned their position to write lyrically and creatively. It's their job about this sort of thing, and all I can say is there are better examples, but I can't think of them. a lot of it would be, he did that a lot. He repeated back to me things I said in this kind of, and sometimes he'd do it like this. But, hang on a minute. You need, and you know what, if it wasn't a mistake I'd made, again, propriety. He was very, very big on, you know what they say, don't you? They all say this, I'm sorry, but you need to understand. And I'll tell you what, most of the times he did this, his reasoning was flawed. Because I was not a dreadfully unfair person, but 9 times out of 10, his reasoning was quite bad. And yet he's thought of it, so therefore it's right. And this is the image I had in my mind when I wanted to make this video. I think if you want to get inside the head of a narcissist parent and the extraordinary and prolonged battle they get into with the child that they've scapegoated, if you can imagine 2 sort of supernaturally powered beings standing opposite each other across a table, and in the middle of the table is some kind of weird orb of power, right? And they're trying to force that orb backwards and forwards, and they're both trying to force that orb towards them so they can hold it, right? And it's a battle of minds, battle of will, and the orb's going, right? And that's it. That's your relationship with your narcissistic parent. And maybe your narcissistic partner, I don't know. I'm not as experienced in narcissistic partners, though I have been there, but not for very long. And they're just battling backwards and forwards with this orb, right? And you know what? Sometimes I actually think they want to do this more than win. Like the battle is better than the victory. I don't know. I mean, I want to hear some of that from some of you. But, and I'll tell you what that orb is. That orb is consensual reality. They think if they can win that battle of minds, they can say what reality is. It doesn't matter that outside that room there's a world going on where there are laws, where there are other people who will have an opinion about whatever it is they're disagreeing about, or who should have that orb, right? It doesn't matter. They only need to win in this environment between the two of you and the small sort of cabal of people that are immediately going to be influenced by this battle. And that's what they're up to. They don't, to them, that's enough. Now, narcissistic abuse survivors, they tend to focus on the bigger picture. They want to find out what is consensually true. They want to find something that is real. Philip K. Dick was, who I very strongly suspect was a victim of a narcissistic parent from the way he talks about his father. There's a short story called The Father Thing, and an entire book called The 3 Stigmata of Palmer Eldridge. And in the notes for both of those stories, he refers to his appalling childhood experiences as a result of what sounds like a very overbearing and I very strongly suspect narcissistic father. Philip K. Dick said, reality is that which remains there after you stop believing in it. And one of the reasons that I loved Philip K. Dick so much was because he was on the same trail as, well, I was on the same trail as him. You know, he was obsessed with locating the real. And it sent him on all kinds of crazy journeys. And he was obsessed with the idea because he was fascinated by drugs and hallucinogenic drugs and psychotropic drugs. And he was fascinated by the idea that 2 people could take the same drug and have the same experience, which would validate, you know, kind of consciousness being more powerful than the physical world, you know, and stuff like that. That theme comes up many times in his novels and in his short stories, especially his novels. And I find it fascinating that is a trait of victims of narcissistic abuse. this desire to find a point of reference in the external world, a consensual reality, where we can all, where there's some safety, where there's some, like I say, consensus, where we can validate the experience, where like we can go to the site of the Holocaust with the Holocaust denier and say, look, here it is. Here's the gas chamber. Here's where it happened. Here's the evidence. Here's the museum full of artifacts. Here's a witness to what happened. You know, we need that. And you know what? We kind of need it too much. In a funny way, the fact that we need it so badly is used against us by the narcissist and by their coterie of ambiguous, shifting voters, right? Who come out on, they seem to come out on their side so often. You know, they use the fact that we're looking, that we're not sure. See, nobody's really sure. No matter, you could be an expert in astrophysics, right? You're not going to be an expert on everything else. Nobody's got it all. So no matter how good you are at what you do, you know what? Maybe an expert in critical thinking, like Richard's been talking about. How good was that? Fantastic video. Maybe an expert in critical thinking is in that position because they're exercising the one faculty that you'd need to have absolutely nailed down. So you could even say, well, that's an unknown. Such and such a thing is an unknown, so you can't make such a definitive statement on the basis of the Occam's razor or critical thinking. Maybe they could do that, but so you'd have to have a critical, in a funny way. You know what? You'd need a panel. You'd need a critical thinker and two experts on the subject you were discussing, right? Who have opposing views of the thing being discussed. So you need three people to get any kind of certainty on whatever it is you're talking about, right? What's interesting in therapy is the therapist doesn't tend to focus on. I've noticed in my therapy, I'll be very lucky, had a very good therapist. In the therapy that I've done, the therapy comes back to, but we can't make your experience a consensual and external. We can't test it in that realm. Why don't we just focus on what's going on with you? Because that is safe. That is real. We can't get the world, and even if we could, we can't get the world to make a judgment on, say, the way my family have treated me without going to court. And even if we went to court, would that really satisfy you? Would that really be an end to it? Because that would just be that court ruling, and that court ruling could be challenged and on and on and on. But what we can work with is what's really going on with you, and that's something I'm very grateful to psychotherapy for. Because one thing's for sure, you can certainly be incredibly honest about how you feel. Because that is something you do have, we do have, I do have dominion of. A lot of what we're talking about is when we don't get to own it, when we don't get to feel that we do have dominion over it. But you do, we do. It's the narcissist's. It's the fraud that is perpetrated upon us by the pathological narcissist that separates us from that. And they're not separated from theirs, from their feelings. They're not honest about their feelings, but when they're angry, I'll refer you to my father's behaviour in my previous statement, when they don't feel they have to justify their behaviour. In fact, let's go even further. I would say, really, they know that their behaviour is unjustifiable. And that's why they do this weird, well, I can't justify it in the world, so I'm going to justify it in this weird orb game. I'm going to justify it in this battle of wills game. And I'm going to make everything about the battle and not about what I've done, said, feel. I mean, imagine if you were feeling terribly and unjustly envious and hateful towards somebody, and you knew it wasn't really fair, really. You knew that you just hated your ex's boyfriend because he's better looking than you, or your ex's girlfriend because she had a nicer body than you, because she was thinner than you, whatever, and it was hate. And if you knew that was an unjustifiable, selfish and childish response, and on some level you do know, right? But you don't want to go down the road of taking responsibility for your feelings. You want to go down the road of being able to do and say whatever you want with impunity, with rage, with anger, and have everybody help you justify your behaviour. You're not going down the road of critical thinking. You're not going down the road of what is consensually agreeable or consensually validatable. You're going down the road of, it's like this because I say it is, and then you're looking at the arguments that are being thrown at you, and you want to make it all about the battle of wills. So when your ex comes to you and says, will you please stop talking shit about my partner? You don't go into, I'm talking shit about your partner because they're better looking than me and I'm envious. You go into, well, if you weren't such a dick, you know, you go into that sort of realm. You go into sort of, this is all your fault anyway. If you hadn't treated me as badly as you did when we were together, I wouldn't be doing this now. Blah, 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 fucking blah. And that's how the narcissist behaves. I think I'm going to wind it up because, do you know what? I haven't done a very good job of sticking to my. I haven't done a very good job of sticking to my point today at all. But I quite like the video so far, so I don't like making them much longer than this. The reason I think that the narcissist and the narcissist's victim have something in common is I know that my narcissist's family behaviour towards me made me very, very angry. And like Escape from Narcissism story, that anger used to leak out in strange places at strange times. And it leaked out in a prejudicial way, and it leaked out in an envious way, and it leaked out in a way that made me want to be superior. And I learned somehow to rein it in and live with it and not be quite like that. But it was hard, and I had to take I had to be very humble, and it was painful. It was very painful. I didn't enjoy it, and I still don't enjoy it. But I feel it's responsible. I feel it's the responsible way to behave. And when I think about the way my family talk to me, but behind everything they say is this seething anger, and they're not. I don't see how they're really angry with me, because I've never really done anything to any of them. The anger is just there. It's an anger with life. Somebody said this. Who said this? The other day. I thought it was brilliant. I think somebody said it in a comment, and I'm not going to be able to credit them. That's so unfair. I'll try. Hopefully, I'll put it on the screen later. Somebody said, if I can remember, I'll say. Somebody said, you know what? I think it might. You know what? I think it was Magical Mystery Tour. Hello, Magical Mystery Tour. They said something like they're angry with life. If I've got that wrong, I'm going to apologise in the message. They said they're angry with life. They're dissatisfied that life didn't give them what they wanted. And that's it. I think that's it. And then they scapegoat somebody for that. And that might be it. That from that simple disconnect all your abuse, all your ruined life, all your anger, all your pain, your lost childhood, your neurosis, the terrible life choices we've all made, as a result of the appalling parenting we've suffered, all of it might just come from that. They didn't get to be an astronaut. And somebody took the fall for that. Somebody had to pay. Alright, I think that's as far as I'll take it today. Please understand, I'm not a clinician or a therapist. It's just my personal diary. These are my thoughts. I always think people should take the advice of the clinicians and therapists in the community, and there's enough of them. So if anything I've said has interested you, feel free to respond. I try to generally look at the comments and everything, and understand this. It's no surprise that we would have anger too. After what I've got loads. I've got loads, buckets of rage. It's not a failing. It's not. I mean, Narcissist Survivor said this as well. It's a feeling like all the others. Don't fear it. It's not wrong, but make a kind of a peace with it. Own it. We're not wrong for being angry. We're not, but the anger, may it not be displaced or misplaced. We need to integrate our emotions, our reactions, our reality, our envy, our pain. It has to be integrated. We have to. I and no one else is asking anybody in this community to be perfect and cured and completely rational 100% of the time. But in return, we should be as utterly responsible as we can. Not just in regard to the community, but for ourselves, in our lives. And it's tricky and it's difficult when our emotions are like the lava at the bottom of the volcano. This is Mr. WTF signing out.